Hello and welcome to the PLMA European event. We are pleased to be able to bring you this interview this morning. My name is Simon Wainwright and I'm Director of Global Insight here at IGD. This morning we're going to be talking about private label evolution in the UK, and I'm delighted to be joined by Paul Stainton, who's a partner at the International Private Label Consult. Good morning, Paul.
Morning, Simon. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. So good to see you. So let's just set the scene with a couple of introductory questions and then we'll get moving through the bulk of this. So setting the scene, how important is private label in the UK for both shoppers and retailers?
Extremely important, Simon. The UK has got one of the biggest market shares of private label in Europe, at anything between 48 and 52%. And that sort of compares with the likes of France at about 40%, Germany similar, the Netherlands at 37%, and quite a lot of other countries lower than that. So really important to the UK market and also to the UK retailers. They use private label to differentiate from their competitors and to attract customers and attract customer loyalty. So it has been important since it started in the 70s, and it continues to be very, very important.
And has that evolution and that because that's quite a substantial proportion of private label being consumed by UK consumers. Is that the same across all retailers? Are some retailers more developed in their usage of private label?
I mean, it's clearly very, very important for the discounters and for the likes of Marks and Spencer's, who are predominantly own label driven. But also really important for all of the other retailers, as I said, because it attracts customer loyalty. So I think across the top 10 retailers in the UK, only one or two of them fall between 50%, fall lower than 50% private label share. So very important indeed.
Yeah, so hugely significant. That's really, really interesting. And those numbers, Paul, that you're sharing around 52%, has that changed over the last few years? What would it have been 5-10 years ago?
Probably changed by around about 2 or 3% in the past 5 years. I think when you get to a certain level, private label share does plateau, and I think other countries nearing 50% see that as well. But by retailer, it's all of the main retailers have seen that 2 or 3% growth. But actually, private label share within the discounters and Marks and Spencer's has dropped slightly because they've actually launched brands, more brands over the last 5 years or so. That's not a significant shift in their strategy, but they have felt that they needed to have some of the key brands just to increase their customer attraction.
Yeah, for sure. And here we are in the UK in the middle of lockdown 3, so I couldn't not ask you about COVID. And my question is, has COVID affected any of these trends towards private label adoption?
Well, I think as all European and international countries saw back in March, April of last year, any trends just flew out of the window. Private label fell a little bit in terms of its share. Reason being availability and the likes of all of the staple products, toilet rolls, etc., flying off the shelves and lots of gaps in store. So the consumers then turned to whatever they could buy. So even private label centric consumers then turned to brands, and actually not even the main brands, any brands that were available. So we saw I suppose, a period of private label dip. But by the time that lockdown started to ease in the summer, we saw private label restabilize a little bit. And I would say that certain areas and certain categories, such as canned goods, long life goods, they certainly held off at a much higher level than they were. And private label benefited from that because they're quite strong categories that private label has got a decent share in. We all know that COVID brought around people eating at home, both breakfast, lunch, dinner. And I think that's resulted in a few interesting trends where we saw a big increase in cook at home. And again, within private label, there's a lot of standard tier products that meet that need. But actually, we also saw premium products products increase in their sales. So the premium tier of private label in the UK, for example, has increased its share by about 3 percentage points, from about 11% to 14% of the UK private label market, on the back of people wanting to treat themselves and buy the ready-to-cook and the gourmet products that they really wanted to have to try and replicate the out-of-home experience in-home during lockdown. So I think, you know, Simon, in conclusion, there's been some real big trend differences. And I think we're in a new norm now. And I'm sure that, you know, a lot of private label retail and suppliers have benefited from this sort of surge towards in-home consumption.
And that trade up towards premium that you mentioned there on private label, is that coming from brands, or is that coming from mid-tier private label going up to top tier? Or
I would say it's going from mainly mid-tier going up to top tier in the product mix. I think brands are still holding out, and of course the total grocery market has benefited. I mean, in the UK, the most recent Kantar data reports a 12% year-on-year growth. Brands are growing roughly at that level, as is private label. I think it's the mix, and within private label, we're seeing quite a shift away from sort of just the standard private label into premium, but also into added value. So the likes of the vegan, the free from, etc., really becoming very popular, and customers are now looking to just buy different things, because let's be honest with you, I think we're all bored having to buy the same things for our now 7 days a week cook at home options.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, that's really helpful context, and I'm sure the audience have really gained from that about understanding private label in the UK. But of course, you weren't always at IPLC. Prior to IPLC, you had a very long and distinguished career at a leading retailer in this country as a buying director, where you managed a lot of private label manufacturers. I guess what the audience will really gain from now would be some practical tips and advice about what a private label manufacturer needs to do. So my first question is, what, you know, in the broadest sense, what did you want private label manufacturers to bring to you? What were your expectations of them?
Ideas, and I guess more ideas. The word proactive is used a lot in terms of the best suppliers, the best private label suppliers are the proactive ones. But actually it's very true. Buyers say they're busy, they are, and that's changing. They're becoming even more busy. So yeah, absolutely. I always looked for the private label suppliers who knew my categories, who knew my workload, so could understand what was important in terms of discussions and what maybe could have been left to an email, and to be just on top of things and really effectively be an assistant. I think a lot of private label manufacturers that succeed almost act as the buyer's assistant, and they are the guys and girls who come up with all of the ideas, what the retailer should be looking at next, and basically just almost give the solution rather than just discuss the potential.
I think our audience will also be interested, Paul, if you can share any insights on how to support getting NPD away with retailers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, NPD, it's all about the supplier being on the front foot, understanding exactly what's going on within both the home market, the international market, and also understanding what's important to the specific retailer that they're talking to. Tailor-make the approach about new NPD to that retailer. I think the NPD quite often is all about brands and what developments the brands have put out into the marketplace. And certainly for in my buying role, we were always wanting to see new technical progression within the brands, ingredients, and we always wanted to either be on the front foot or certainly being very, very near and close behind the brand. The idea could come from the retailer as well, The retailer may have lots of other thoughts about what they've seen in restaurants, what they've seen in terms of just the new ideas that are coming into their local markets. And they'll be saying to the suppliers, come on, you think about this and you deliver me some new products within that area. So it can come both ways, but it's very important that private label manufacturers act quickly, because private label can be quicker to the market than the brands can be. The brands go into all of their product research. They have to cost out what they put into the market in a detailed way, because the cost of failure to the brands can be really big, whereas a private label can be a lot more dynamic.
Yeah, so private label can be more dynamic and they can get to market faster. I think that's a really important couple of points there. Yeah. And what about the role of trends in setting that strategy for private label evolution? So trends like veganism, health, how significant are they?
Oh, very significant, Simon. I did a bit of research on the vegan ranges within the retailers here in the UK last month for Veganuary, and there were literally hundreds of new vegan products launched, which was very impressive considering all of the restrictions that I guess 2020 had in terms of new product development opportunities between the retailers and the suppliers. And yeah, it basically produced some fantastic blocking in stores. It produced the ability for retailers to market their own label vegan ranges very heavily. And yep, it was a massive opportunity that clearly a lot of manufacturers had worked hard with their retail partners on. I think the next challenge for that particular area is for them to start thinking about, okay, well, that was the Veganuary range. It's actually probably too big a range. What's going to be the ongoing range? And which products are going to be the winners and losers? Because as we all know, within lots of new products, there are some products that just don't meet the thresholds that we need to keep. So vegan, free from, all of the health, immunity products. There are so many opportunities with regards to the new emerging trends. Again, we've just got to be on top of them and be on the front foot in being ready to supply the retailers with these products.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose a really key question would be to understand how much you think private label manufacturers should be investing in shopper research and insight before they bring these ideas to you as a retailer.
It's costs. That's the challenge. It costs, and I think once you've got a new idea, you're very keen to actually put it in front of your retail customers. There are some really good ways nowadays to research, and it doesn't cost that much actually, and that's online. So there's quite a lot of operators who will put new designs out, new product ideas out to targeted audiences worldwide or to specific countries, and ask for immediate responses. And actually you can see the responses coming back in real time. So I would say that it's important to do the research. It's easier that way nowadays than it was. And retailers, again, will expect their manufacturers to do such research and actually probably will gain from effectively gaining that free research on the products. But I think also don't let it hold you back, because you've got to be quick and retailers expect you to be sharp and not to deliberate too long.
So an opportunity has been spotted. Some private label manufacturers have done their research and they think they've come up with the right concept, the right product. Once it's been identified, how do you approach, or how did you approach the sourcing of that product? What were the approaches you took?
Fairly straightforward, I guess, in so much as if it was the retailer's idea, we would just go out to 3, 4, 5 of the best suppliers that we had and who we felt would be able to quote for that particular product and produce that product. Clearly, if it's a supplier's idea, we will work with that supplier, and I would be very surprised if any retailer would take a supplier's idea and eventually buy it from another supplier for the initial launch. So yeah, I think it would be the usual sourcing technique. It would also involve identifying a benchmark, probably. Certainly if it's the retailer's idea for a new product or a new variant, new flavor, the retailer would look at what's there in the marketplace, identify what they feel was the benchmark, which wouldn't necessarily always be the brand. Could be the own label product which they felt was the best in terms of consumer delivery, and put that out as the benchmark. So straightforward, I would say. And again, commercials wouldn't always be down to price. It's got to be down to quality, supplier service levels leading up to the tender, and basically the supplier and retailer relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very clear. I just want to jump topic now, Paul, to a topic that's very, very important and significant right now, and that's the topic of sustainability. And within that, I'd just like to understand a little bit more about packaging and kind of where, if you think the pace of, I guess, interest in that area has increased recently, and how important that is to private label.
Without doubt. I don't think you can go a day at the moment without reading about some packaging development, and I would say 95% of those are all around either sustainability within the packaging itself, or certainly a packaging development that will help the environment. A couple of really interesting areas which I've recently seen in the UK. Aldi, for example, they have removed the shrink film from their 4-pack baked beans as a trial, and it's actually cost them money because they've had to invest in till technology to be able to give their customers the 4-pack price as a multi-buy, which they didn't have beforehand. They've also they're in the throes of removing their shrink film from all of their canned drinks, soft drinks and alcohol, and moving those into cardboard packaging. Tesco are removing the plastic trays from all of their whole chickens, and they've actually also resized their packaging and the size of their cheese blocks for them to be, number one, more efficient through the supply chain, but also clearly to reduce the amount of plastics. So not a day goes by without a packaging development on sustainability. Again, manufacturers need to be on the front foot with those ideas.
And on this area of packaging, do you think, or indeed broader sustainability, do you think private label has an advantage over branded products in this regard?
Again, it probably comes back to my earlier point about speed to market. I think there is a lot more dynamic opportunity, I think, within private label. Retailers are very, very keen to be the first out there with any packaging and sustainability message. They all put their sustainability pledges on their website, so it's really easy research for manufacturers to identify a particular retailer, see what their requirements are, and come up with what they need. So I think, again, that can be done much quicker within private label than it can be from some of the branded guys.
Good. I want to change topic again now, and we're going to change to marketing and how you would go around marketing private labels in the UK. Could you outline for the audience some of the, I guess, best practice ideas you've seen around marketing private label? Sure.
I mean, first thing to say is the marketing budgets aren't really spent on private label, or certainly weren't historically. Clearly brands had a big influence in marketing spend, and for private label retailers, certainly in the UK, they would major their advertising spend and focus their advertising spend on their overall brand. I guess the change in that came around more so with the discounters and bringing in their sort of, I would say, the discounter sub-brands, and the initiatives such as Aldi's Swap and Save in around about 2010, when we started really being shown own label products versus the brands. And other retailers have carried that through, clearly the discounters with Lidl as well in the UK, but even the likes of Tesco, they will use their own label now. They'll use it in their Aldi Price Match campaign, they'll use it in their Club Card campaign. And all retailers focus on their private label premium offerings at seasonal times such as Christmas. So I think from a marketing point of view and a pure marketing of television and press advertising, it really has taken a step change over the last 10 years. I would say that in terms of general marketing, though, of private label, retailers can sort of benefit and market their products through not just trying to attract the customer's attention in store with nice packaging, but actually having clear, good messages on their packs for the customers to read when they're at home. Because I think private label, as well as brands, you will have your bottle of ketchup or whatever it may be out on your dinner table. And people are now consumers are really, really focused on what's in the ingredients, what sustainability messages there are on the products. And yeah, basically looking for something interesting. And retailers who probably in the past would have just had their retailer name and the name of the product, a little bit boring. But I'm seeing a lot more innovative private label packaging, which is helping market that retailer. I think a lot of packaging at the moment is, I would call it sort of funky, interesting. You see quite a lot of these disruptor brands putting out great packaging, and it attracts. And I think that own label packaging will need to move towards that sort of style to keep the consumer interest and to allow the retailer to continue to market themselves as a really good and trustful retailer to the consumer.
So we are, as you say, we are seeing an evolution in how private label is kind of marketing itself and on pack as well with its messaging. But do you think there's anything the UK can learn on private label marketing from elsewhere, from overseas perhaps?
Yeah, I think I've seen a couple of interesting, I suppose, developments overseas. I mean, one's actually down to making packs look more interesting. And some retailers, as I said earlier, have now sort of moved their products into more sort of brands, sub-brands. The Tesco Everyday, Tesco range, for example, Sainsbury's, similar with their Everyday at Sainsbury's range, now offering their private labels in branded looking packagings and branded looking names to try and tackle the Aldis and the Lidls of this world head on with their style of packs. In other countries, we've seen white label packs, so basically value packs, almost disappear. They still appear in a few retailers, but not many. Some retailers actually took the decision to take the white packs completely out of their range and literally just bring the price down on their own label, their standard tier. Really interesting development, that, because it cost them a lot of money, but it also gave the discounters a real conundrum as to how to tackle that. So I think we're seeing more interesting packaging, and we've seen that both within the UK and elsewhere. But there are other developments, and one which is a really interesting one that Weird RPLC saw the other week was what the online retailer Picnic in the Netherlands have done. Now, they are online, so it's a different market, but they've decided, and I guess they identified that really the pack design is less important online because the consumer is really buying from their computer. And also, online images don't really work, standard images don't really work that well online. Small packs, for example, you put that on an online website, and by the time you're looking on the selection, it's a really, really small image. So Picnic are rebranding all of their private label, and they've only just got one big image on the front of the pack. The packs we saw were some toilet rolls with literally images of rabbits on the front. Attractive and just disruptive and interesting. And I do think that might actually develop even further going forwards because online, as I said, you don't really need to have the packaging. So why would you not order from a great picture on the website and then you get your delivery and the product is simply in a foil tray with just a small label on it or whatever it may be. So I think there's going to be a lot of developments worldwide and surely will hit Europe as well in the way the packaging.
Very good. Some really good examples. Thank you for sharing those, Paul. You mentioned an e-commerce operator there. Really interested to hear your perspectives on whether e-commerce growth could actually impact private label evolution. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's a slight risk, I suppose, or threat to private label initially, because private label isn't that geared up to e-commerce, hasn't really, I suppose, set itself out to be right for e-commerce up till now. But I do honestly think that there's an opportunity there. I think in the same way as when bricks and mortar stores started, and people were used to buying brands, it took a little while for them to be able to sort of recognize private label and the price comparison. I think the challenge on e-commerce is for, again, to take a bit of time the consumer will continue to spend more and more time buying online. And in doing so, we'll start to see the benefit of private label in terms of the price comparison. Really important, though, that they also appreciate the quality comparison, which is quite a challenge on screen. But I do think that there's a couple of things which will take place with private label as it starts to gear itself up more for online. One being the size of pack. I think that bigger size packs will become more popular because the consumer doesn't mind that they get delivered to the front door and they don't have to take it home in their boot of their car. That might even extend to case picks or case quantities being available online, as they already are on the likes of wine. And I also think that online could and would give retailers and private label suppliers the opportunity to extend the range. You know, there's no longer any barriers of the number of SKUs that could be offered online. That's a slight, I suppose, watch out and shout out for private label manufacturers, because we don't want private label to be supplying too many variants. Production and volumes are so important within production facilities and production efficiencies that we need to be careful that product ranges don't go too big. So yeah, I think that it's really interesting as to how it's going to develop, and I also think, taking the picnic example earlier, we've got to be looking at the way the packaging works and it actually delivers online as well. Yeah.
I must ask you one final thing. We couldn't not talk about this either. We've talked about COVID, so we have to also talk about Brexit. Just interested to hear if you think that will have any particular impact on private label in the UK.
I wouldn't have said it'll have as much impact in terms of the way the private label functions in the UK. However, it could well have an impact from an exporting and importing element. At the moment, it's a very tricky situation. And I was only reading the other day that some small companies are actually thinking of pulling out of exporting from the UK just because of the costs that are associated and the new certification required. So I think we've got to get over that hurdle because export, without a shadow of a doubt, is a really big opportunity, both for exporting from the UK into Europe and vice versa. One of the challenges we have at the moment is understanding other markets. We can't travel, which is a real pity. That's probably where I suppose IPLC can help, in terms of we've got partners in lots of European countries, so we can do market insights and research in those countries. But I do feel that if we're not careful, suppliers are going to just be scared of exporting. And I think we've just got to get over this hurdle, and that is an opportunity for the future.
Great. So let me just finish off with one final question for you, Paul. Have we reached a ceiling on private label growth? And if there were any markets in particular across Europe that you think might actually be ripe for even greater growth over the next couple of years, who would they be?
Okay. Well, we're certainly we're in a great place to grow private label at the moment. With the current economic climate as it is, and whenever the economy is contracting, people tend to move towards saving money and going towards private label. We've seen it before we will see it again. So that in its own right is a great opportunity for the private label market to grow. Also, the growth of the discounters is unabated and will continue. Huge investments worldwide, and as they grow, their private label business grows, and you find the competitors' private label business grows as a result of that. A lot will also be down to retailer strategy and how much they want to sell private label. Traditionally, private label makes more money than brands, but the retailers must balance what their consumers want. Within private label, I think there's also the opportunity to increase the value. We mentioned earlier about upgrading from standard. We did a bit of research on value-added private label a couple of years ago, and we saw that on average, the added value private label sectors such as vegan, organic, free from, the retail price of those products were anything between 190 and 240% of the retail value of the standard range. So that in its own right as well is an opportunity. But again, it all needs to be balanced. I mentioned earlier about some of the market shares, and I think if other countries will get to around about 50% eventually, then there's still a lot of headroom there, as they're at only about 30 to 40. So that in its own right will grow the market. And then there's other markets which are pretty underdeveloped within private labels, such as Russia, which again I see as a really big opportunity.
Brilliant. Paul, that's been really, really helpful. We've covered lots of ground. So really thank you for your time this morning in helping cover up the UK private label market. I hope to those watching that you found this session useful. And from Paul and I, it's thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day with PLMA. Thank you very much.